Alistair, hi. Thank you so much for making time and speaking with us early morning. What do you make of this U-turn? Just last week, we heard from the UK Prime Minister saying that they stick their ground, talking about how their decision is right, and a sudden U-turn coming in. What do you make of the entire geopolitics?
Good morning. Well, this is entirely political. First and foremost, it is because they are in Truss and Kwarteng are in deep trouble with their own party. The party conference gets underway today. One of the main protests about the mini budget has been cutting tax for the very most well-off in the UK, at the same time as Truss is refusing to rule out cuts in public spending, notably benefits, NHS and so on. So this is a political measure designed to try to smooth Truss and Kwarteng's passage through the party conference. Keep in mind that the latter is actually due to speak to the conference this afternoon. Furthermore, let's also keep in mind that despite all her protests, perhaps most notably on the BBC yesterday, that she was not about to U-turn, the Prime Minister has a remarkable track record of U-turns during her political career over the last 12 years or so. Just check back in the records if there's any doubt about this. She is famously for turning, despite modelling herself on Margaret Thatcher, who, of course, was very famous for the soundbite, "The ladies not for turning." As far as the economics are concerned, however, I frankly don't think that this is going to make a huge amount of difference to the way in which investors and markets are going to look at the unfunded tax cuts which Kwasi Kwarteng announced in the mini budget. The amount of money which this will save in terms of revenue coming into the Treasury is pretty marginal compared to 45 billion of unfunded tax cuts.
Right. What do you make of other news flow coming in as well? People are talking about huge issues as far as funding is concerned. You're talking about quantitative tightening across, and then you get such sort of news flow as well. All of this is contradicting by itself?
Well, first of all, credit to the Bank of England last week for reversing its policy of starting to offload the amount of government bonds it's bought and leaping in to save what was looking increasingly like a market catastrophe, a possible meltdown, even with lots of problems for pension funds and for mortgages as well. I don't think those pressures are going to go away. I think investors are going to look at this and they're going to say, so what? This doesn't make any difference. And we need to see in as soon as possible the Chancellor's plan for balancing the budget. Now, he's still talking about late November for that. 23rd, I think, is the date. We still are not seeing a report from the OBR on what the mini budget actually means. And until we get that sort of information, and it is possible that once Parliament returns on the 11th of October, you will see a cross-party vote to force the government to release the OBR's report on the mini budget. But until we get that, I think you're going to continue to see all sorts of negative headlines about the government's plans, and that you're going to continue to see market pressure being exerted on the government.
Alistair, just before we let you go, just wanted your quick take regarding the entire flip-flop that is happening in the UK region, and that's one of the reasons that there were no buyers for the bonds even at lower levels, because a part of the street had lost its faith in the UK economy and the dichotomy of moves coming in from the central bank versus the government. Do you think this will only widen from here on given the U-turn?
I think unfortunately U-turns do tend to add to uncertainty about the way in which the government is going to behave. Now, the government will dress this up as responding to pressure. We listened, we heard. Truss said yesterday that she'd learned about presentation. Maybe she's now going to say she's learned a little bit about substance as well. But I don't think this move is going to reassure markets in the slightest. I think they're going to continue to see Truss and Kwarteng as ideologically driven rather than being driven by what we'll call economic orthodoxy. They would say orthodoxy as if it were a dirty word. But there is a reason why what they call economic orthodoxy is orthodoxy. And that is because over many, many years, it has been shown to be pragmatic and by and large works better than other possible approaches to economics. Until we see some rational, serious economic thinking on behalf of the government justified by economic principles which are well established, I think we're going to continue to see markets being very, very nervous of this government.